Good morning. Well, it's not morning yet. It's still, 11 o'clock, 11:45 at night. So, good evening. Anyway, time to actually get started on some work today. We will be doing some basic stuff today. I don't think we're going to be doing anything too crazy. We need to make a kind of a set character height in data for Unreal. Blueprint spawning methods. We need like heights can be easily set in Blueprint, and custom AI movement default states, those things can be set when spawning entities. We want to make macros for creating entities. We want to make macros for creating effects, make macros for creating objects, and we need some various editor improvements. And I think we're going to start off with all these editor improvements. So that's going to be, let's see. We need snap to grid for paper 2D collision, using a larger grid size. Snap to grid in editor. Make snap to nearest whole number for grid size. And we need to fix the collision showing up in the entity editor. So hopefully that's what we're doing today, is basically getting our character heights, because Fatsack's too tall right now, and he's too tall because his sprite's big, but we want to be able to have bigger sprites. And we want like the scale to be figured out nicely, kind of without us doing a whole heck of a lot. So let's boot up our editor. And just see exactly kind of where we want to set our character height. I mean, I know we want to set in Blueprint, but we definitely want, like, where do we want our default height to go? Because we need to say, like, this character should be its height in pixels, I guess, and then like its height in the world. And I'm going to get rid of a lot of stuff that we don't need here that's distracting in our level. Sorry, Fatsack, but we got to get rid of you. Gotta check out all the things. I'm still just kind of waking up and getting into stuff, so I'll be a little bit slow here for a while. Let's get rid of the cone. Who cares about the cone? Nobody cares about the cone. Alright. So how do we actually want to deal with these things? I think it's like on the character entity itself, maybe. We want like how big it is. Or do we want some other sort of data, like do we want it on the entity proxy? So we're like saying, well, this thing should be so and so large, you know, so and so many units tall. I think if it was on this object, which has all the animations and all that stuff, it might be a little bit easier to figure out. Because we're basically saying, like, how tall is he in pixels, and you know, he's like, okay, this guy is like 500 units tall in pixels. So how tall is he in Unreal? Let me see. We've got like a. Is there like a pixels per centimeter sort of thing for sprites? So I guess it's pixels per subdivision. Size of single subdivision in pixels in X. Oh, well, this is for geometry stuff. We don't want any of that. We want to look at the pixels. I think it's 100 for the size in pixels. 100 centimeters, so like 1 centimeter per pixel is the default thing for Paper 2D. I was typing there, Visual Studio. I think we've got, yeah, our frames per second. The scaling factor for pixels and the real units. So this is on our paper sprite. Alright, so let's take a look at our sprite real quick. And where is this? This is on paper sprite. This is on the sprite itself. And it's inside of the sprite category. So it should be over here. Pixels per unit, which is 1. Okay, so if everything has got 100 centimeters, so right now 100 1 pixel equals 1 centimeter. So we want to just do that. Do we want to actually change pixels per unit for these guys, or do we want to? I think we want to change their scale at runtime. So like when you spawn in this entity, it's going to start at a certain scale, and that's probably. I mean, is that what we want? Well, when we're creating these entities, we're creating them through the entity proxies. So, which have pointers to those entities. So we do have the information when we spawn it to change the scale. So we can actually do that. So I guess we should probably put it on the actual entity itself then. It's kind of like base scale, and then the Let's see, if we look at FatSack, FatSack has an entity proxy. And we don't have an entity proxy, oh we do. So I think we need two things here. We need like a pixel height, and then we need like a height in the world. Because we want to know, like, because all the frames are different sizes. We want basically like, this is the size he is in pixels almost all the time, and then this is how big he should be in the world. So, and then that's kind of the scaling factor. And should we keep his scale at 1, but scale the... Basically, when we spawn all these guys, we would change the sprite pixels per unit. No, I think we just want to use the scale on the actual object when we create it. So we want to change the... I think we definitely want to change the... It's either the entity proxy or the entity. And I would rather change the entity proxy, because that's the thing that spawns everything in. Just kind of makes sense to me. So I think we'll add it to the character on the entity proxy. So let's go do that. And by it, I'm referring to... We're going to add our scaling stuff. So that should be the entity proxy. And everybody has an entity proxy, so we just need to go to our entity proxy data, add our stuff, and then we can get started. So we're going to have our... I guess we should have an int for our number of pixels tall. So it's like int32 pixels tall. And then we want our float, and we want to have like meters tall. And we're going to want to default this to something reasonable. So I just say they're 100 pixels tall and 1 meter tall. So what this would basically do is it would say, okay, this thing will have a scale of 1. Now, should we scale? Like, what exactly should we scale on this thing? Because I'm gonna have to see. It's basically when we put the object into the game, we want this logic to run where we scale it, and we only want to do that once. So we got to go figure out exactly where they are. So let's see, it's gonna be where we want to set the scale probably inside. We want to have like a method or something that says like set initial scale or scale to data or something like that. We want to call it with like a wanted height, it looks like. So I think that's going to be on the proxy actor itself. And let's see how big Bitey actually is. Like, let's get his S idle. What the hell is it even called? There is no S idle. What the hell is it? It's called Just Breathe, because he never actually had a stationary idle. So let's see, how big is he? So he's about 300 tall, that's what it looks like. Alright. So we gotta do is open up the Bitey player proxy, and we're gonna say he is 300 pixels tall and 2 meters tall. Let's ask Adam how tall Fatsack is. I'm not sure how big Fatsack's supposed to be. So Fatsack, we're gonna have to take a look at his. Can we get rid of the fucking search results, please? So let's see, let's get his S idle. See, I think this is about where he's as big as he's gonna be. So he's about, what, 128 tall? So we'll say he's 128 tall and he is, what, 30 centimeters, so he's 0.3 meters tall. Alright. So we've got that data saved. That's looking good. So what we need to do is we need to void set entity height, and we want to say like N32 pixels tall, and we want like meters tall. or scale to height, and we should have like scale to height, auto scale to height. Should be things that we have. I'm being informed that I have grossly overestimated the height of Bitey. He is not 2 meters tall. Alright. Call to auto scale to our height. Call to scale to our wanted height. So basically we're going to do like if ambientity proxy equals null pointer, we're just going to return. Otherwise we're going to call scale to height, and we're going to do ambientity proxy we need the pixels tall and then the meters tall. And so we're actually going to want to set our scale, and our float scale is going to be what our pixels tall divided by our meters tall. So it's going to be pixels tall divided by 100.0f divided by meters tall. So let's see, if this was 100 pixels tall, it's going to be, in 1 meter tall, it's going to be 1. If it's like, 100 meters talls, yes, alright. Did I misspell that? If this was 128 divided by that, so it'll be like 1.2 divided by 0.3, so it's going to get a lot bigger. So we want him to get smaller, right? Because if he's like 30 centimeters tall, then we should actually be seeing what ratio that actually is. It should be something like, how do we turn 1.2 into 0.3? By 1.2. Yeah, so the scale, I think it's going to be the meters tall divided by this value. So this would be like 1.3 divided by that would be like 0.25 scale. And if this was like 1, this would just be 1. So I think this is our scale. So we're just going to do f transform trans equals get actor transform, and transform dot set scale 3D. We're just going to do effector scale scale scale, so uniformly scale this thing, and set transform, set actor transform. So that should scale us to the appropriate height. Now we need to call this when we spawn in an entity. So kind of like after we call set entity proxy. So I think that's inside of our editor extensions. Inside of like our actor factory, I think. So we actually like set entity proxy. Yeah, so we need to crack this open here. And we're actually going to say like actor auto scale to height. So if you change something in game, etc., it should just automatically do all the things for us. So this is the entity proxy. What about the player proxy? The player proxy is just going to spawn a player proxy object. So what we want to do is we want to go to like entity utils, and the entity utils needs to read the. We've got like create generic actor, create entity actor, and we're passing in an entity. So we're like setting Dashkin entity right here. We're also going to want to auto scale the height. Entity proxy actor. Well, the entity proxy actor actually creates the entity actor based on itself and then destroys itself. So we actually want to pass in our scale here, is what it looks like. So we need to actually pass in like the scale for this thing. So we need create entity actor to actually we need an auto scale to height and a scale to height on the entity actor as well, is what it looks like. So let's make it. Excuse me. So let's grab that from our entity actor. So we'll have the scale to height and all that sort of stuff. And let's see, we have the base entity data. Do we actually store the proxy anywhere? So we might actually want to throw this on the entity itself and not the proxy? Well, sure, why not? So we'll take it off the entity proxy and put it on entity data. Say auto scale to height for this one. But we need another thing here. We actually take like a, not only a position, but a const f vector scale. Let's go to our entity utils and edit. Create entity actor. And this is going to be the same as this guy, except it also takes a scale. So here's our create entity actor. We're passing in this other thing. So if we don't have a scale actor, auto scale to height. Otherwise, we set our scale 3D. Alright, so our entity proxy needs to, it's entity proxy like get entity data. So let's see, what is this get base entity data? It's not a pointer. Okay, so it's a dot. We probably want to actually throw this in the entity utils, this like scale to height. So we'll just have like so it'll be like, yes, this is looking better. It'll be like a static void, like scale actor to height as like a utility method. It'll just be any actor. You're like, okay, well, if it's this tall and blah, then just make it the right height. And we're gonna need to pass in an A actor. So if actor equals null pointer return, otherwise we need to get the actor transform and set all the things. So we'll just do class A actor pointer actor here, and instead of this like auto scale to height, we just do, yeah, we'll do auto scale to height on the actual actor, which is going to call this scale to height. So the proxy actor is going to need to call Dashkin into utils. I'll pass in itself. And the same thing needs to happen inside of entity actor here. So I guess it's just entity dot entity data dot pixels tall and meters tall. So we can get rid of that. So what this should do is when we spawn in an entity, we should use the correct scale based on the begin play of the entity proxy. Otherwise, if we create something from like blueprints or whatever and just drag it into the scene using like our actor factory, this auto scale to height will work properly. So any proxy, player proxy, should the player proxy also scale? Let's see, the player proxy actor begin play is going to let's see, it's going to create an entity actor based on the entity proxy that it has on it, which is going to use the entity data and spawn the thing properly. I still don't like having it be on the base thing. Like if we want a taller version of something, it now has to do things that I don't really like. Screw it, we're moving it back. We're moving it back onto the entity proxy data. And the entity is not going to have it. And inside of our entity proxy actor, we need to just do such. Inside of our entity actor, we need the proxy data. I mean, we could have it on both. And have like a boolean on it. So why don't we do that actually? Because I need the flexibility, but I also need the access right in here, so whatever, we're just making decisions slowly. And so we'll actually have like a use custom height on it. So basically you'll be able to set inside of your data if you want to use a custom height on your object. And inside of our entity proxy actor, we're going to do like if use custom height. We're going to use these scales, otherwise we're going to use the ones that are on the base entity data. And what happened to all the formatting here? It all went straight to hell. Sort of thing just bugs me. Alright, Dashkin any utils scale actor to height is what we want. And that means we need to change over here. And instead of the any utils, we are calling set actor transform auto scale the height on the entity actor, and again auto scale the height on the entity actor. Which this is not going to get called if we have a proxy. It's going to get called here if we have a proxy, so we should be okay. So let's make sure. Let's see if our guys are actually going to spawn in properly. And it'll just set the initial scale, and if somebody wants to go in and change stuff, then it'll do that. Otherwise, what's the other issue that could be run into here? If you placed an object into the world, it no longer will update. So if you went in and you like re-exported the sprite and the sprite's larger, it's never going to rescale that object. So if you re-exported them and you had an object that was drug into the world, it's not going to work properly. Pixels tall is right here. It's totally on, I guess not the entity data, but the entity. Just have a check there for a null pointer on the entity, and we'll see. Because if you put an entity proxy into the scene, that entity proxy is going to work properly, but an entity itself wouldn't. And we're not supposed to be placing those things. Anyway, so it's really that this entity proxy actor should be, it's getting its own scale. So if you change the scale of this thing, this entity proxy while it was in the game, it's not going to work super well. Maybe we should change that up a little bit. Because these are protected, so we can't actually get any of this information off of here. Morning, Karakan. I don't know, it's working. There's no... Oh man, somebody's no longer subscribed to Adam. I'm thinking... And you lost all your emotes. Anyway, we're just gonna go ahead and make these things public, because we don't need to worry about it too much. Isn't that what happens when you don't have emotes? Like, it's because you're no longer subscribed or something like that? Maybe you're like an Amazon Prime member and your Prime subscription renewed. You have to like renew that every single day or month or something. Alright, I think this should do it. Whoops, that's wrong. Yeah, what we're doing right now is we're basically trying to make it really easy to spawn things at the correct size. So basically, if your FatSack sprite is 200 pixels tall, but FatSack is only supposed to be 30 centimeters tall in the world, we want a nice way that just kind of magically works properly and is easy to use. Because it's not actually easy for us to figure that out. So like if I say like, well, FatSack should be 30 centimeters tall, well, which frame of his animation do I check to see what height he is? Like, you could have some arbitrary rules, like I'll just check the first frame of the idle animation and that's how tall he is, or I'll take the average of all the heights. But then like you re-export your sprites and then FatSack's a different size in the world, and that just doesn't work. So what we're doing is we're saying you have to just say like his sprite is 100 units tall and he's supposed to be 30 centimeters tall in the world. Just set the scale properly for me. But then we get into a lot of different things like, well, what if I wanted this one object to be a little bigger or whatever. So, but I do have a problem here, which I'm trying to figure out exactly the right way to fix this, which is if you place... Alright, yeah, now it's working. Oh, Gary. If we place an object in the world using an entity proxy, so there's an object in the world which represents this thing. If we go and change FatSack's height to like 20 centimeters, it's not going to update all those things in the world. What we kind of want is like a flag or something that's like, hey, this guy has been custom sized. So I mean, I could set it on the proxy actor itself, and you type in a custom size for the thing, and it spawns it at that scale. Maybe that's the way to do it. Is just have like this entity proxy actor have its own little thing on itself, which is like a bool that you tick, and then you can set the height yourself. Otherwise, it'll just use the regular height regardless. Yeah, I think that's probably the way to do it. So why don't we just go ahead and do so? So we just want to override the meters tall, I believe. So it's going to be entity proxy actor. We want public stuff. We want like use custom height, and we want meters tall. So custom height will be false, and meters tall will be just, like 1. Alright, so if use custom height is false, so we're not going to use the actual scale of the object. We're going to use, we're going to compute it. So it doesn't matter if you scale this thing. It will never actually change the spawned actor's height. So if use custom height is set to, we should just do like float height equals, or should we just call auto scale the height and just have it figure out? Yeah, so we can just do that. So we'll just call auto scale the height at the beginning of our play, so our thing will just automatically. We took a few things out here, didn't we? Nope, we didn't. It's like, where's the scale? And it's like, oh, it's there. Okay. So auto scale the height, and basically it's going to say like if we're going to have meters tall, and we're going to have pixels tall. So this will be meters tall equals this, pixels tall equals this. Alright. And then we want if use custom height. We want meters tall to be our meters tall here. And then we call the method I just deleted. Yeah, so that's what we want at the moment. So this will be pixels tall and then meters tall. So that'll be in begin play. Basically, this player proxy is just like a fake object. It exists for just one frame and basically makes what it should in the world and then kills itself. So it'll auto scale itself once to its height and then delete itself. So this should allow us to basically have a base height for our thing inside of our game data, have a height inside of the proxy object in data, and then have a custom height in the editor in the world. And what that should allow us to do is if we change like FatSack's height to 30 centimeters in its base data, it should carry over to everything unless you've overridden it yourself in the editor manually. I hope. So that's the plan. We'll see if I got it right. It's kind of convoluted and kind of like, why the hell would you ever do that? But it's basically so we want to be able to programmatically make all this stuff, and we also want to not have to go edit like every single game object because we made FatSack 25 centimeters tall instead of 30 centimeters tall or something. So you can see how absolutely tiny FatSack is. Like, so that's with FatSack being 20. How big did we make him? We made him 128 pixels tall, and he's 30 centimeters. So if we make him, so he's real tiny. Bitey is also a little bit too big at the moment. He's not supposed to be 2 meters tall. He's supposed to be 1.5 meters tall. So you can see he's smaller now. So let's give FatSack a little look. So this is FatSack. I believe his scale is 0.23, 0.23, and 0.23. So let's do a little bit of math real quick, just to make sure that's correct. So if he's 128 pixels tall and he's supposed to be 0.3 meters, then it's going to be 128 divided by 100. It's going to be 0.3 divided by this, I think is what it was for the scale. So 0.3 divided by 1.28. Which looks like that. So yeah, that scale matches up. So if he scaled properly, he is the right size in the world. So FatSack is just tiny. Look at that. It's a very small. These bushes are just too big, and all that. So that's how big FatSack is in our world, which means like our world is like totally out of proportion at the moment, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. We now have properly sized FatSack. So if we actually go to his proxy object, which is right here, I should be able to click use custom height, and let's set him to 1 meter tall, and see what he does. We spawn him in. He should be a lot bigger than that. Just make Bitey fat. Yeah, the scale for Bitey looks wrong. Is it wrong though? Probably. But it doesn't look like the stuff took with FatSack, so